my fellow readers, this is Dark Symphony 777 with another fan fiction review. As always, a link to the story will be in the description below. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel, click on that bell for notifications, leave a comment in the comment section below on your thoughts on the story, and finally, this is my opinion. My opinion is not indicative of everyone in the world, so please respect that. So, the stories I am doing a review of is Magic's Birth and Magic's Birth: The Sisters' Memories by the Psychopath. These are both My Little Pony fanfictions, and they were actually suggested by the author himself. I think he still remembers that I did Blank Slate. And also, do you know what the way is? Of course you know what the way is. I spit on you! I couldn't help it. So, these stories. This is weird. Not even getting into the plot, but it's weird. It's one of those stories where like the pony princess turned to be something else. I know there's like different variations of like the ponies having like different alternate versions of themselves. Like with Twilight, you have like the scissors Twilight, which is like a demented Twilight who has like gigantic scissors for like hind legs. There's like the Conversion Bureau Celestia. There's Celeste AI from what was the name of those stories? The one where like Celestia is like an AI who like gets everyone to go into MLP MMO and just takes over everything. I can't remember what that story was. What the name of that story is off the top of my head. But this one is Celestia and Lunia are millennia-year-old robots. Yeah, that's more or less the gist of this one. So, but if you want a longer version, the plot is actually told in two parts. There is this one single story, and then there is a much longer sequel that takes place right after this, which I'm in fear. I don't get why. Like, why couldn't you just have these chapters connected to these? That's just me. Not really criticism. That's just an inquiry. But more or less, Twilight doesn't know where magic came from, so she's kind of curious about this. She's like finding all these books. She's like, well, I found out all these theories about magic, all this, but I don't know where magic's from. So she thought, well, I'm old enough, I'm wise enough, I'm going to ask Celestia and where it came from. Celestia takes Twilight to this empty cave and reveals that her and Luna, well, right here, you were never the first ones here, nor were you the second. We were the second. And more or less, Celestia reveals herself to be a sort of ditzy, airheady AI. Well, not AI, robot. And Luna is a robot as well. And Celestia basically reveals that the makers made us, and magic is actually not magic. It actually used to be a fuel source, an energy source that somehow mixed. There was these two energy sources. There is a blue energy source and a black energy source. And they somehow intermingled and created what Equestria knows as magic. So magic in this version of Equestria is actually just, I guess you can say, the decays of two drastically different fuel sources that kind of decayed over the course of their carbon footprint sort of deal. And then this story ends with Twilight wanting to ask Celestia and Luna where they came from, which leads to this story that basically this is actually what they're supposed to look like. This is what the robot horns are supposed to look like. I think they're really neat. They also have like little hands around in their hooves that kind of light. And this story kind of explains that. And I actually want to touch upon this sequel because I'm going to be real. This one shot, not good. This story This one chapter is not good. This is good. Not this. But going back to the plot of this. So, this story, first off, it reveals that Luna is older. I can't remember if Luna being older was directly mentioned here, but I know for a fact here is when I think when they touch upon it. So Luna was actually built before for a time. Well, technically, Celestia is technically older because the story reveals that Celestia was in service longer, but Luna got a conscious first. Basically, she became sapient first before Celestia. So they kind of go by. Celestia might have been around longer, but Luna was the one who kind of got the conscious, so therefore Luna's older. Luna was built by the makers, which we all know are humans. However, one neat aspect that I think makes the story really good is the complicated use of the unreliable narrator trope. So, for those of you who know, in terms of my controller's not broken. Sorry, that was bugging me. The unreliable narrator trope is used where someone might tell a story and they're being dishonest about it, either intentionally or unintentionally. And either usually told to figure out some certain lies. Like a very popular one would be something I actually didn't know about until recently was the scene in The Incredibles where Syndrome was actually explaining his motivations to the whole thing to Mr. Incredible. Now, I can't believe I actually missed this. Like the first almost dozen times I've seen The Incredibles, because I think The Incredibles is a really good movie. But in the scene, in the flashback, when Mr. Incredible is telling Buddy to go home, he's holding Bon Voyage, basically the French villain, and as he's telling us, Bon Voyage turns his head and basically kills him off. But when Syndrome retells the story, he leaves out Bon Voyage, which is basically Incredible just glaring at him and basically acting like and basically showing that he's deliberately warping the truth so that way he can be right. Like I said, that's something I only just found about because I don't know why I missed that. It took me until literally like a week ago to literally notice that, but it's true. But this story actually kind of does a unique twist on that, in the fact that more of the use of the trope is used. So basically, so the premise of the story is that as my neck, there we go. My neck was bothering me. So Twilight actually gets the answers from her. Basically, the story is used from memory banks created by Celestia and Luna. So basically, mostly Luna. Luna has a memory bank, and she uses her eyes to show a projection of what's happening in the memory storage of her memories. But a keen eye, if you actually read the story, says that she hasn't actually shown anyone this in millions of years. This is not 100 years. This is not thousands. This is millions of years that she hasn't shown anyone, and she's basically trying to load up everything by memory bank, and she's not exactly rusted at it. This leads to a lot of moments where a lot of these details are actually intentionally made vague and unknown because, one, everything is told from Luna's memory bank, so she only sees what she's seen. She's not able to reasonably grasp what's exactly going on around her. Like, there's a lot of context clues that you actually won't miss and only will get once you read the whole story and come back and read it. That shows that Luna doesn't really understand what's going on in the background, but I think there was a comment I actually saw in this story that kind of explains it perfectly. There's a lot of stuff that's happening in the background, and as the story goes along, it slowly, constantly encroaches upon Luna's point of view. Because again, we're seeing the story from the memory banks of Luna specifically. Celestia's there, but she's kind of like just kind of doing Celestia things. Well, robot Celestia things and just being a dunce, an airheaded dunce. But that actually leads to a unique, like I said, the unique take on unreliable narrators, where Luna actually doesn't know she's being unreliable. She's like, she kind of senses something's off, but she doesn't know what. And over the course of the story, it actually cuts back to Twilight asking questions and looking at things in a different way and pointing out these inaccuracies to her. And Luna is like Celestia's kind of slow on the uptake because Celestia's kind of dunce. But Luna is like, realizes, wait a minute, that's actually kind of right. And that leads to Luna to realize that she actually missed a lot of things that she never did because of her journey throughout this entire story. And in this story, she's built as like a little cleaning robot made by these two very rich and popular people. Her makers, they're basically very popular or very rich, and she goes outside, see these blue lights, and she becomes sapient that way. And so she gets orders to try and find other people like her. And so that's where she goes. She finds Celestia, who's basically kind of pulled apart of the scenes in an info center as a core. And then, they kind of pull herself together. So he's like, ooh, I want to be like you. And she's like, okay. And she's like, I'll name myself Celestia. Okay. Of course, the info center actually shuts down because she was actually the core, and they kind of lose their power for that. And they kind of just wander around, and then they realize there's more people like them in the world of the Black, so they kind of get repaired. They meet this old man who was basically a repairman. He tells them about the black energy. They go to the world where there's black energy, where they're all rough and tumble. They find these other sentient robots named Biddy Bee, Rowlup, and I forgot Dissonance. There we go, Dissonance, and they basically go wander around and they just talk and they kind of mess around with each other. And then they come back to the Blue City because it's like they all want to see what the Blue City is like. And then a big incident happens that kind of causes Celestia and Luna to kind of shut down. And then they reawaken millions of years later in the birth of the ponies. There's even like a little vestige of Cadence kind of reference throughout the story with the pink energy. And of course, there's also gray energy, which kind of implies the possible existence of Discord. Don't know for sure. Just guessing, because if there's Celestia, there's the black, there's the blue, there's the pink, and then there's the gray. I'm just guessing that's Discord. And a neat little thing is like I said, Luna slowly figuring out that she's kind of not realizing certain aspects because the whole unintentional, unreliable narrator, not because she's being duped or explicit. It's more that she never really noticed it until Twilight basically pointed it out to her. So once she figured out what was going on, she's like, And the story kind of ends with everyone dying. All Rowlup, Dissonance, and Biddy Bee, they're all and Gala. They all die. Because reasons. Granted, they do get a stowaway, which is like a broken down old robot. That's implied that somehow survive at the end of this chapter. There's still plenty of very vague questions, because this is one of those stories that kind of relies on having to be vague and the reader trying to pick up the context clues, and the context clues are not easy to pick up because Luna doesn't really know what's going on because, again, so long since it happened, and she's kind of catching up with Twilight, and she's only just learning these new things through Twilight's point of view. It's a really nice plot. As much as I not a fan of this one shot because it's so clunky, this one is basically everything is fixed about the story. It has a good plot. The characters are really good. Besides Celestia and Luna, Rollup, Bitty Bee, Dissonance, and Gala, they're all loosely based off the elements of harmony, minus Twilight. Like you have Gala, who's Rainbow Dash and Pinkie Pie. You had Rollup, who's based off Applejack. Bitty Bee is based off Fluttershy, and then Dissonance, who's based off Rarity. And so you gotta have them all interacting. They kind of in a sort of like a ancestor type of thing, where like even Twilight's like when they're first introduced in Rollup, like that's just Applejack. It's like nah, that's not Applejack. There's millions of years past. You're gonna see like at least some crossover. There's gonna be millions of people. There's gonna be at least some copy pasting in terms of personality. It's like that looks like Applejack. It's like no, it doesn't. Yes, it does. Luna, that looks like Applejack. It's like no, it doesn't. And of course, Celestia is just like da-da. Yeah, Celestia is a dunce. She's kind of the more aloof comparison to Luna. Luna is like very straightforward. She's the one who's trying to plan everything, and kind of everyone's rallying upon her. While Celestia is like, I'm gonna dance because I can. And she like messes around with people, and she kind of goes off and acts like a very ditzy robot because she wasn't fully repaired once Luna kind of picked her up, and that never really went away. No matter how much they tried to fix her, she's kind of stuck with it. Yeah, it kind of, but all the characters really work. From Gala's impatience and habit of destroying everything around him without even thinking, and until about 5 minutes later, reminiscent of Pinkie, to Rollup's like idea, like anything can be solved by just punching it really hard, and which again, like Applejack, very stubborn, very solid. Bitty Bee acting like a cuddly bear, like I must hug all these things, and like all the robots are like, can we just please let us go? Okay. And of course, Dissonance acting like Dissonance, thinking everything has to be part of a show. Not a fashion designer, but he's very overdramatic, just like Rarity. Again, Twilight actually questions this because he's like, yeah, there's a point where it stops becoming a coincidence and starts becoming like, this is really strange. Like, no, it's not, Twilight. That's literally just Fluttershy. She looks like Fluttershy if she was a robot. No, it's not Twilight. As a group, as they kind of meet together and swarm together, they all form a great camaraderie. They all feel like fully fledged, despite being robots, and despite technically in these stories, Celestia and Luna don't really become fully sentient. They only really become fully sentient in what's implied after the events of the story. They're only sapient here, so they still very much act like fully fledged robots. They just kind of following the logic sort of thing. I don't know what they want compared to like Gala and Rollup and all them who are sentient. Like you have four sentient robots following two sapient robots, which is at least interesting to say the least. It's one of those stories that you kind of have to read. Just, I guess that's the way I can kind of see the story. It's like it's one of those stories that it's really, really hard to describe because everything is so vague, and that's kind of the point of the story. It's supposed to leave the readers up to interpretation. Like you're supposed to figure out the context clues, all the clues that are going on in the background, that are slowly encroaching on Luna's vision. Again, as you see over the course of the story, it slowly approaches until the point where they have to confront. They're basically being forced to confront it, and then it leads to Celestia Luna ruling Equestria. It's a really good, good classical like vaguely well done sci-fi. It's just hard to describe. I can't. It doesn't matter how much I describe it. It's hard to properly describe what's going on because, like I said, you have to read the story to figure everything out. All I can tell you is here's kind of what happens. Figure it out. But yeah, they have good characters. In terms of grammar, the grammar is really well done. In terms of pacing and sentence structure, everything is very much sensed like a robot, so everything's very mechanical. The reading is very stiff, but again, that's because the story is told from Luna's point of view specifically, and Luna's way of seeing things is very vague and very stiff because she hasn't gained full sentience yet. So it makes sense why it would be very blocky and kind of confusing at first. You get used to the writing, in the fact that it's in the very stiff writing. But once you get used to it, you figure out oh, all this makes sense. Good. So yeah, I can't really say much more because all I can say is read the story. Would I recommend the story? I would recommend this story. I would reluctantly recommend this because you kind of need to read this or understand this. But if it wasn't for that, I would say pass this one chapter. It's really rough. Favorite part? That's a tough one. I'm so tempted to put at the end of the last chapter where the robots are about to die and Gala's last words I want to see cotton candy clouds. And Ralph's like, the fuck? Right before they die. It's knowing the fact that Gala is technically supposed to be Pinkie Pie, just hearing a military prototype with the literal common sense right before he dies, saying, "I wish I could see cotton candy," and the Applejack robot just looking at him and saying, "What the?" Right before they die is weirdly hilarious. I don't know why. I'm guessing that's fitting for Pinkie Pie because, of course, if she was about to die, she'd say something like, "Tell my mom and Mrs. Cake and Mr. Cake, gazpacho soup." Are you quoting movies? Yes. But yeah, I would recommend this story. What would I fix? Nothing here to really just polish this first story. This story is rough. I think he even admits it in the comments. Yeah, although I admit I kind of half-assed. Yeah, you can tell. I don't even have to read this comment to know that, yeah, you definitely half-assed this one. I honestly also would think probably delete the story, just put it right here, and put it as a prologue sort of thing. There's really no need for this story to even exist by its own thing when you can easily just add it here. But on this side of the story, no. Everything I think is as good as it can be. I think I'm the only one. Oh yeah, I did message him. I think I'm the only one in that actually figured out the whole cadence thing, which is a neat little detail for me personally. But yeah, I like this story. I think it's a good story. I honestly think it should have more comments. Go check it out when you want. This has been Dark Symphony 777, and cut.